I never thought losing internet for a few minutes would turn into the most surreal day of my life. It started quietly, too quietly. I was in my home office on a Tuesday morning, halfway through a remote briefing with my team, when every screen froze at once. The video call dropped. The secure messaging app went dark. Even my phone lost its Wi-Fi connection. At first, I assumed it was just another service outage. It happens. I reached for my phone to hotspot, and realized I had no signal routing through the backup line either. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I stepped outside to check the utility box mounted on the side of my house. The HOA had been obsessed with that box ever since I moved in. They claimed it was an eyesore, even though it was installed by the service provider years before I bought the property. What I saw made my stomach drop. The protective cover was open, the conduit exposed, and my fiber line was cleanly cut, deliberately. This wasn't weather damage. This wasn't an accident. Someone had taken tools to it. Standing just a few feet away, clipboard in hand, was the HOA president, our neighborhood's infamous Karen. She didn't even look surprised to see me. Instead, she smiled the kind of tight, smug smile that tells you she thinks she's untouchable. She informed me, calmly and proudly, that the HOA had resolved a violation. According to her, I had been given multiple warnings to remove unauthorized cabling. I told her there had been no warnings. She shrugged and said the board voted to handle it. When I asked who authorized cutting a live utility line on my private property, she snapped back that HOA rules overrode personal inconvenience. I told her she'd just committed a serious crime. She laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "It's just internet. You people are so dramatic." What she didn't know, what no one in the HOA knew, was that my connection wasn't just for Netflix and emails. I work remotely on federally contracted systems. I don't talk about my job. I don't put flags or signs up. But my home internet is registered, monitored, and redundantly logged for security reasons. The moment that cable was cut, multiple systems flagged the interruption as a potential sabotage event. While Karen was still lecturing me about aesthetics, my phone buzzed, this time on a secure cellular fallback channel. The message was short and blunt: connection lost. Confirm status immediately. I responded with one word: cut. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I simply told Karen she needed to step away from my property and that authorities were being notified. She scoffed and told me to call whoever you want. She even made a joke about how she'd handled cops before. Then she walked back toward her golf cart, completely convinced she'd won. 30 minutes later, she realized how wrong she was. The escalation didn't come with sirens at first. It came quietly, efficiently, and far faster than anyone in the HOA could comprehend. Within minutes of my confirmation, my phone rang again, this time a live call. I stepped back inside, shut my door, and answered. The voice on the other end didn't introduce themselves by name, only by function. They confirmed my location, asked whether the damage was visible, and instructed me not to touch anything. When I explained that an HOA official had physically cut the line, the pause on the other end wasn't confusion, it was calculation. Then I heard the words that changed the entire neighborhood's mood: remain available. Do not engage further. Response is being coordinated. Outside, Karen was already spinning her own version of events. I could hear her raised voice carrying across the street as she flagged down neighbors, claiming she'd resolved an illegal installation and that I'd been uncooperative. She was enjoying the attention, until the first service truck pulled up. Not an internet provider. Not the HOA's usual contractor. A black SUV with government plates stopped at the curb. Then another. And another. No lights. No drama. Just quiet authority. People began stepping outside. Phones came out. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Karen's confidence cracked the moment she noticed she was no longer the center of control. She approached one of the vehicles, clipboard still clutched like a shield, and demanded to know who authorized them to be there. She tried her usual tone, sharp, commanding, condescending. It failed instantly. She was told, calmly, to step back and provide identification. When she demanded their credentials instead, she was informed she was interfering with a federal response. That word, federal, rippled through the HOA like an electric shock. Within 10 minutes, the HOA board group chat exploded. Someone leaked screenshots later, and they were chaos. Messages flew back and forth asking who approved cutting the cable, whether there was a vote, whether legal had been consulted. One board member openly panicked, typing in all caps that cutting utilities was illegal in every state. Another tried to distance themselves, insisting they weren't present and didn't agree. Karen, meanwhile, was suddenly very quiet. She tried to retreat. That was her biggest mistake. An agent stopped her before she could reach her golf cart. She was informed she was being detained, not arrested, just detained, for questioning related to potential infrastructure sabotage. The color drained from her face. She stammered that she was just enforcing HOA rules. That excuse earned her nothing but a raised eyebrow. She was asked who instructed her to act, whether tools were used, and if anyone else assisted. When she hesitated, she was told, politely but firmly, that lying would make things significantly worse. By then, the entire street was watching. Another agent approached me to document the damage. Photos were taken. Measurements recorded. They asked if anyone else had accessed the utility box previously. I told them about prior HOA complaints. That was all they needed. The situation officially moved from incident to investigation. Karen overheard that word and nearly collapsed into a nearby lawn chair. The HOA president, her title, at least for now, had gone from neighborhood tyrant to federal liability in under an hour. And this was only the beginning. The street no longer felt like a neighborhood. It felt like a controlled zone. Agents moved with quiet precision, setting clear boundaries, redirecting curious neighbors, and documenting everything. No one was yelling. No one was running. That calm made it worse. Karen sat rigid in the lawn chair, hands clenched around her clipboard like it was the last thing anchoring her to authority. Every few minutes she tried to speak, only to stop when she realized no one was listening to her anymore. An unmarked van arrived next, followed by a uniformed technician who didn't waste time with pleasantries. He examined the severed fiber line, shook his head, and confirmed what everyone suspected. The cut was deliberate, clean, and made with the kind of tool you don't accidentally use. That statement was recorded immediately. Karen tried to interject, said it must have been routine maintenance. The technician didn't even look up when he replied, "This wasn't maintenance. This was interference." That word hit the HOA board like a hammer. 2 board members arrived in a panic, clearly summoned by frantic texts. They tried to approach as a group, hoping numbers might restore some authority. It didn't. They were stopped at the perimeter and told to wait their turn. One of them started apologizing before anyone even accused him of anything. Another asked, repeatedly, whether this could be handled internally. The answer was short, no. Inside my house, agents reviewed system logs showing the exact second the connection dropped. They matched it perfectly with the timestamp from the technician's assessment. Then they asked me something that made the room go very quiet, whether the interruption could have compromised ongoing operations. I answered honestly, I didn't know yet, but the risk alone triggered mandatory reporting. That was enough. Phones came out again. Calls were made. The scope widened. Outside, Karen was finally informed she was no longer free to leave. Not in handcuffs, but under direct supervision. She protested, insisting she had a meeting and responsibilities. An agent calmly explained that she now had different responsibilities, and they were not optional. When she demanded a lawyer, she was told she was welcome to call one, but she was not going anywhere until questioning was complete. The HOA's power structure collapsed in real time. Emails started hitting inboxes across the community, emergency notices hastily sent by the vice president, urging residents to remain calm and claiming the situation was a misunderstanding. No one believed it. Neighbors whispered. Some filmed from behind curtains. Others openly watched from driveways. Karen had spent years threatening fines, towing cars, and enforcing rules with absolute confidence. Now she couldn't even stand up without permission. By late afternoon, the agents were done pretending this was a minor issue. Karen was escorted to the SUV, no longer arguing, no longer smug, just pale and shaking. One of the agents finally explained, loud enough for the nearby board members to hear, that cutting registered communication infrastructure, especially without authorization, was not an HOA violation. It was a serious federal matter. That was when the HOA realized this wasn't just about one cable. It was about consequences. By the time the sun started dropping behind the houses, the neighborhood was unrecognizable. Patrol vehicles lined the street, not with flashing lights, but with doors opening and closing as agents rotated shifts. Karen had been sitting in the SUV for nearly an hour when the meltdown finally happened. From inside the vehicle, her voice rose, panicked, sharp, cracking. She insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that the HOA had full authority, that she was being targeted unfairly. None of it mattered anymore. An agent stepped out and addressed the remaining board members directly. He explained, slowly, deliberately, that HOA authority does not extend to damaging private or registered infrastructure. Cutting a live communication line, regardless of intent, crossed multiple legal thresholds. The word thresholds was not reassuring. One board member visibly sagged against a mailbox. Another started frantically making calls, trying to reach the HOA's attorney. When they finally got him on the phone, his advice was blunt: stop talking, stop emailing, and stop pretending this could be smoothed over. Karen didn't take that advice. She demanded to speak again. She accused me of provoking her by refusing to comply with HOA rules. She claimed the cable was unsightly and therefore justified removal. That argument died instantly when an agent reminded her she had signed no utility authorization, held no easement rights, and ignored the legal requirement to notify the provider. When asked why she didn't simply issue a fine or seek mediation, Karen snapped that fines don't scare people anymore. That sentence was written down word for word. That was the moment the HOA truly panicked. The vice president tried damage control, offering apologies, promising restitution, and even suggesting the board would review leadership. The agents weren't interested in promises. They wanted records, emails, violation notices, meeting minutes, and any communication referencing my property. When the board admitted those records were informal, and some votes were conducted over text messages, the response was chilling. Informal governance does not protect you from formal law enforcement. Karen was finally escorted out of the SUV, not free, but transferred. As she walked past the neighbors she once bullied, she couldn't make eye contact. Her clipboard was gone. Her voice was gone. The authority she wielded like a weapon had evaporated. No speeches. No last threats. Just quiet, irreversible reality. As the vehicles began to pull away, one agent stayed behind long enough to tell me the investigation wouldn't end with today. The incident had triggered a broader review of the HOA's conduct. If this was how they handled minor disputes, they wanted to know what else they'd been doing behind closed doors. The HOA thought this was about control. They were about to learn it was about accountability. The fallout didn't come fast. It came thorough. In the weeks after that day, the HOA tried to pretend nothing had happened. Notices were quietly removed from the website. Meetings were postponed. Emails went unanswered. But behind the scenes, everything was unraveling. Subpoenas arrived. Records were demanded. The board's informal texts and undocumented votes, once treated like harmless shortcuts, became liabilities. What they had brushed off as routine enforcement was now being examined line by people who did not care about neighborhood politics. Karen was the first to fall. She resigned as HOA president before charges were formally announced, believing, wrongly, that stepping down would shield her. It didn't. The investigation determined the cable cut was intentional, unauthorized, and reckless. Her claim that she was just enforcing rules collapsed when evidence showed she acted unilaterally, without legal counsel or provider approval. The case never went to a dramatic public trial. It didn't need to. She accepted a plea agreement that included fines, mandatory restitution, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. The HOA itself wasn't spared. Insurance refused to cover the incident, citing intentional damage. Legal fees skyrocketed. Several board members resigned rather than sit for depositions. A special audit uncovered years of procedural violations, improper fines, selective enforcement, and funds spent without authorization. Residents, once afraid to speak up, suddenly found their voices. A recall vote was called. It passed by a landslide. Within months, The HOA was effectively powerless. A court-appointed administrator took over operations, stripped the Board of Enforcement Authority, and rewrote the bylaws to align with state law. Fines were refunded. Liens were released. New rules were issued limiting board power and explicitly prohibiting any interference with utilities or private property. What had once been a neighborhood ruled by fear became something resembling a community again. As for my internet, it was restored within hours of the incident, this time with reinforced protections and written notice that any future interference would trigger immediate escalation. I went back to work. Life moved on. But the lesson stuck. HOAs thrive on the belief that no one will push back. That day proved what happens when someone does. Karen thought she was cutting a cable. She ended up cutting the cord on her own authority and the HOA's grip on the neighborhood forever.